Yep, thank you guys. So today with the focus question, I don't really need you to do now, okay? But yesterday we spent a little bit of time of focusing on how America mobilized into World War II, how we got ready. We saw some of the things from the reading. I believe you would have seen the rationing, you would have seen the victory gardens, you would have seen other things along those lines. So now we're just going to kind of have our notes on it and clarify some of these things, okay? So take another minute here. Okay, let me present now. I wasn't even presenting the slide. Take another minute. Please copy down what propaganda is, and please just copy down some details from the World War II draft. All right. Please read what's about rationing and war bonds as well, but please copy that down into your notebook. Okay. So we went over rationing with World War One. I just give you a quick reminder of what it is. It's having less of something and then sending the rest out to the soldiers. So maybe having less food, maybe having less supplies for your own personal self and your own family. And when you sacrifice that, you can then send the rest out to your soldiers. So if you have a pantry, let's say, full of food, maybe send some of that out to the soldiers if you're not going to really have all of it. If you can eat a little bit less, if you have some less supplies, that's known as rationing. So everyone was expected to ration when World War II was going on, no matter if you were in the war or not in the war. You could also buy war bonds if you wanted to donate to the war effort, similar to GoFundMe, if you guys know what that is. But this was you kind of went to an area. If you see this area, buy war bonds. You get a little pin saying you bought and helped to support World War II in terms of helping them out. Now, people that had not much money, they could donate a little. If you had a lot of money, you could donate a lot. It was whatever you wanted to donate. Okay, so it was like a little bit of a charity fund, I guess you could say. All right. The big thing we want to talk about in World War II is something that all countries kind of participated in, but Germany and the United States, definitely led the way in this. And this is known as propaganda. I consider it like advertising for the government. What I mean is it's a message that is intended primarily to serve the interests of the government. So it's the government sending out a message that they want the people to buy into. It was often used by the Allied and the Axis powers during World War II by having the media show certain things or not show certain things. So a big thing you'd see around newspapers, you'd see them around the country, you'd see them everywhere, is this sign with Uncle Sam, okay, saying, "I want you for the U.S. Army." All right. You here? You have us now. I have you now. I have the rest of the Regents class later. All right. So it's saying, "I want you for the U.S. Army." And, what exactly does that mean? Well, what it pretty much means is that they want people to serve in the U.S. military. And it's basically like Uncle Sam, who was a figure for America, trying to get people to enlist in the Army if they weren't drafted or anything along those lines. Germany, let's take a look at this one. It says warning here. It says like our homes are in danger. And you have this kind of Adolf Hitler looking figure from Germany. And then you have this Japanese leader kind of looking over the United States, like ready to attack us, so to speak. So this was the message that, we were in severe danger and we needed to protect against these countries. And this is sometimes known as propaganda. In Germany, you'd see this kind of same thing. You look at this very well-dressed Nazi German person, the way they're dressed. I'm not exactly sure what it says in German, but it's probably something inspirational to get people believing in the German cause. All right, so we had propaganda. The Nazis definitely had propaganda. They had a guy by the name of Joseph Goebbels who was all responsible for that, controlling the media. In the United States, there's freedom of the press. In a fascist country like Germany or Japan, there's no freedom of the press. So the government really controls what the people do, see, or don't see. And that's known as propaganda. All right. The World War II draft. So many young men volunteer, get drafted into the war. We talked about this yesterday. Many women go right into work in the factories. I know we talked about this yesterday, but now I want us to make sure that we definitely have this idea down. Many women went into the factories, and this was in large part thanks to the advertising and the propaganda of Rosie the Riveter, which is this lady over here to the top right. It says, "We can do it." This was used as an inspirational way to get women believing that they were important for the war cause, which they obviously were. And this was their way of convincing them to contribute in any way they could, like joining up in the factories and making the weapons and doing the things they could. If they weren't going to go out and fight, that's not a problem. They could help out in other ways. And that we can do it is the biggest thing. Okay. And Rosie the Riveter was very big in getting women to get into the factories and inspire them. And that's a pretty famous American picture you see there on the top right. All right, let's go. You may not be done, but we need to just keep moving in such a short period. Okay, let's get into this. For those that don't remember, that is our Supreme Court packet theme. So please get out your Supreme Court packet. I'll give you another 30 seconds to do it. Please copy down this very famous Supreme Court case, Korematsu versus the United States, 1944, into that Supreme Court graphic organizer. This is an important Supreme Court case we should go over during World War II. All right, so yesterday we looked at the Executive Order 9066 by President Franklin D. Roosevelt, where they basically placed a lot of Japanese Americans on the West Coast in internment camps. Your book is going to go into so much detail on that. I really don't even need to spend a lot of time on it. What we do need to know, though, is that the Supreme Court stepped up and took on a case that went into this a little bit, and their Supreme Court decision, a little bit surprising, I got to say. So the executive order came into question with this particular guy, Korematsu, and the case got all the way to the Supreme Court, but ultimately said the relocation of Japanese Americans, regardless of their citizenship, was constitutional and legal because we're in a war and a rebellion. When there's a war or a rebellion taking place, a lot of people don't have the same rights that they would if there's peacetime. We saw this in the Civil War when Abraham Lincoln suspended habeas corpus. We saw this a little bit in World War I with Schenck versus the United States, where people were saying things against the U.S. government and they can get a little bit of trouble. So this is like kind of not the first time, but to go as far to put them into internment camps and to say that's legal, I would definitely say that that goes a bridge above, the expectation of, what the United States of America is. The Supreme Court said that the U.S. had the right to take away Japanese civil liberties, with the fear that Japanese spies may be working against America. Now, this really never came to fruition. This never really came to be true. Later on in history, when we learn about the Cold War a few years after this, there are, Soviet Union spies. There are things like that happen, but this was not one of those cases. It's a very odd thing. And not too many Japanese Americans were, working with the Japanese, if any at all. So the fact they took away, thousands of people's civil liberties and put them into an internment camp to, keep an eye on them was definitely not a great moment in our history. Definitely a moment that, we should look at as, a time we should grow from. And certainly, I think 10, 15 years after this, I think the U.S. government, actually apologized to the Japanese, gave them some reparations, it was a big mistake. I think American government realized that, but People were scared. And it doesn't make it right, doesn't make it wrong. It's just the nature of how the time was. When 9/11 happened in 2001, I remember there was a little bit of fear of people who were Muslim or, Muslim born Americans. There's some fear of that, but, we grew a little bit as a country. We didn't necessarily intern any of the Muslim Americans in this country after 9/11. So, it's good to see that we grew a little bit from this mistake. And that's an important thing. All right, last thing we'll do before we get into we got some regions questions. So let me know in the chat some of these questions here. Actually, no, we have this slide, then we have the regions questions. I apologize. Let's take a look at the African Americans. Please copy down the red and the blue, and then we want to just have a discussion quick. All right. So many African Americans served honorably during World War II. Just I want to remind everyone that the Army is still segregated. This is the last war where whites and blacks would be segregated in the military. But whites and blacks, even though they're all fighting for the same country, and we're fighting against Germany, we're fighting against Japan, and we're fighting for American freedom and, staying out of fascism, we still fight in separate barracks. It's really stupid. Really, really stupid, to be honest. But with that came one of, the more famous African-American military groups. This is called the Tuskegee Airmen. We will spend more time on them next week, but I definitely just want to mention them for the first time now. They're famous pilots from the Tuskegee Institute in Alabama, and they fought some very brave missions as pilots, helping out fighting against Germany, and they're recognized as a very famous group. We'll talk about them more a little bit later, though. However, there were many African Americans at home. I don't know if many is the right word, if it's some, but there's a good portion of African Americans at home who are just generally unhappy because America is putting all of their emphasis into fighting against, Germany, Japan, Italy in World War II, yet, maybe missing some things at home, so to speak. So there's a very famous quote that Langston Hughes said that maybe I'll just share with you is Langston Hughes was a very famous poet from the 1920s, but obviously still a prominent figure in the 1940s during World War II. So he said something along the lines of, freedom is not just to be won over there, it's meant to be won at home too. So write in the chat what you think Langston Hughes means by that quote in blue. Write in the chat what you think that quote means in blue. No one? No one knows what the quote means? No one wants to take a shot? Okay, well, I think the way it should be interpreted is that Langston Hughes was a African American. Many African Americans don't have equal rights really because of segregation, and we know that the segregation really isn't separate but equal. And he's talking about how really a lot of African Americans don't really have full freedom. So maybe we should be just as focused as helping out those group of people within our own country as opposed to helping out other people in other countries and fighting against these other countries. So we did get attacked at Pearl Harbor, which is an unfortunate thing, but there's also some problems at home. So there's always, whenever you go to war, there's always that kind of sentiment like, all right, maybe we should really focus on what's hurting us at home before we go fight other countries. And that's obviously a fine thought, okay, whether you agree with it or not. All right. All right, let's go to the Regents questions here. A main purpose of government ordered rationing during World War II was to what? Why did we ration? What's the best answer? Three is correct. Very good. Conserve raw materials for the war effort. Therefore, those people can have more of this stuff. Be careful with this one. During World War II, posters of Rosie the Riveter were used to what? There's always a mistake that people make. Not two. Everyone always makes it. It's okay, Jacqueline. I appreciate you trying. The correct answer is one. Rosie the Riveter was not meant for women to join in the armed forces. The armed forces mean that you are a soldier on the ground. It was meant to recruit women into the wartime industries. That's where the factories are, where the industry is. So if you go very quickly with that one, I could see how you can easily make that mistake. And that's a little bit of a tricky question. Okay, but one is the correct answer. It's not meant to get women to join in the fighting. It's meant to get women to join in the factories. And I've seen that mistake made many times, Jacqueline. You're not the only one, I promise you. All right, let's try this one. The United States Supreme Court decision in Korematsu versus the United States concerned what? Emmanuel says three. Emmanuel, you are correct. Very good. Limiting civil liberties during wartime, okay? Japanese Americans had their civil rights, civil liberties taken away because we're in a war against Japan, Germany, and Italy. And we did not treat the Japanese Americans so well because of Pearl Harbor and our fight against Japan. In Korematsu versus the United States, the Supreme Court said that the removal of Japanese Americans from their home was constitutional because what? So now we're looking at the American perspective on why this was necessary. Jessica says three as well. Jessica, you are correct. This type of action was necessary during a national emergency. They were worried of a threat from Japan, so they thought this was a necessary maneuver. I think this is also one you can maybe just use process elimination. Okay, there wasn't strong evidence of Japanese, for number 4, doing anything on the West Coast. Many Japanese Americans did want to serve in the military. They didn't refuse. And most Japanese Americans were not U.S. citizens. That's not true as well. If they're a Japanese American, you're a citizen. If you're an Italian American, you're a citizen, right? You know, if you're born here, you're a citizen. It doesn't matter, where you come from, so to speak. Okay, we'll do that tomorrow. Now, before we go into the World War II battles and before we look at some of the fighting and some of the weapons, I think it's important we take a step back, okay, and review some of the things, and that's what your assignment is, okay, besides Textbook Thursday due tonight, okay? What you're going to do is, all right, you're going to basically answer the questions that have been leading up through all the things for World War II. So you have to tell me who's on what side again, okay, using the word bank. You have to remember that. You have to tell me who some of the leaders are, what country they're from. You're going to see their names come up again. Some are very important names. You answer question 3. And then, you got to answer 4 through 9. And then maybe question 10 if you answer question 9, no. And these are all questions from the last week and a half of World War II. I don't want to go forward if you forget who's on what side. I don't want to go forward if you forget what the year the United States joins. I think it's very important before we go into the actual battles and fighting starting tomorrow, before we go on. So you're going to take a step back. You're going to do some review work for this. This is going to help you with your test later on, but this is just very good to help you before we move on into some of the battles of World War II. All right. Quickly, I'm going to take attendance. No one go anywhere. You have another 2 minutes. I think it's fine if you could just get started and do maybe 1 and 2, and then you could finish this up later for homework. All right, I'll be here for the next few minutes for you guys too.